Hi, everybody. Before I get started, I do just want to say how awesome I think it is to be at a game-related event where there's a line for the women's bathroom. So, awesome. And with that aside, we're going to continue with my presentation. We don't have time for UX. Now, the majority of this presentation is using examples about the tools process. However, you can adapt this method for various forms of exploratory research. So about me, my name is Laura Teeples. I am a UX workflow designer at 343 Industries. My undergraduate degree is in industrial design, but my career migrated toward UX, so I've been mostly working in UX design, and I have been working on internal tools development for hardware, software, and games. Now, working on UX and internal tools, it's a relatively young field, so that means there's a lot of exploratory research that needs to be done. And that also means that there's often small teams with very low amounts of resources. But on the upside of working in in-house tools, we have in-house users. So ideally, we can have daily collaboration with our users, regular feedback, faster iterations, and just be best buddies with our end users. However, because it's games, our users are also trying to ship a game. Now, for the remainder of this presentation, I'm going to talk about game developers, and that means anyone who actually produces and helps create the game. So that could be artists, designers, programmers, producers, etc. So they're trying to ship a game, which means that we have some pretty unique hurdles that we have to overcome. One, packed schedules. Our users are constantly busy meeting deadlines, so it can be extremely difficult to run exploratory studies. Two, they're uncomfortable giving feedback, so it's hard for us to evaluate the tool set. And three, it's hard to identify sustainable solutions because a lot of developers have difficulty articulating their problems. We're going to dig more into why some of these happen a little bit later, but overall in tools, what we're going to do is talk about a method for exploratory research that you can use to overcome all of these hurdles and get all the research that you need. So we're going to tackle it hurdle by hurdle. Hurdle one, packed schedules. The most common statement I hear as a UX designer is, we don't have time for UX. And who here can agree with me on that? Like, yeah, we don't have time for UX. Just about every non-UX person ever, especially in tools. And what the deal is the developers, our users, are prioritizing their stress. They're constantly under pressure to ship the game, and then they take what little time they have left to prioritize the next most important thing on their schedule. Buttons sticking a little bit. Prioritize what's next on their schedule. Unfortunately, Tools UX is somewhere down at the bottom. So they really don't have time for UX in the sense that we're familiar with working with them. So we have to work really hard to work around their schedules. So they don't have time for UX, but they do have time for a meeting. Especially with producers, they love meetings. So let's take advantage of it. A 30-minute meeting is too short. We can't get exploratory research done in the breadth that we need in only 30 minutes. However, 90 minutes is way too long. We're going to hear, that's a waste of my time. I've got an entire environment to make in 2 weeks. So we need to hit that sweet spot right in the middle of 60 minutes. So what can we do in an hour? Now, in my former days as an industrial designer, we used to book hour-long meetings called sticky note meetings. Great name. And as you can guess, it involves a lot of sticky notes, a lot of Sharpies, and a series of prompts to help spark ideas. And so the results are exactly what you see over here, just hundreds and hundreds of sticky notes with a lot of ideas. So the way that this works is you utilize this prompt cycle to do question by question by question and keep the meeting moving at all times. And so this works as there are 3 different stages: ideate, agree, and vote. In the stage of ideate, the moderator states the prompt. For example, how could you get to work without driving a car? And they start a timer for about 2 to 3 minutes, and everyone shouts out the ideas while that timer is running, and woo, this is going fast. and then writes up their ideas and sticks them on the notes and gets them up on the wall as fast as possible. When the timer stops, we're done. And we move on to stage 2, agree. Stop. Dear heavens, I'm very sorry. Clicker, there we go. Stop and check off the notes that you agree with. You can see the little check marks that appeared on there. And then we move on to stage 3, which is vote. You start the timer again for 2 to 3 minutes. There we go. And everyone has 3 stars to mark on their top 3 sticky notes. You could put all 3 stars on the same sticky note if you want to, or you can just put 1 on each sticky note, but you get 3 per prompt to use for your voting process. And then you start over again with a new prompt and repeat for 1 hour. Now, the result of this is hundreds of drawings and ideas. Team consensus on the top ideas from that voting process, and directions for immediate next steps. You just pull a sticky note off the wall and begin iterating. So that 1 hour meeting saved us nearly a week of work. So what we're going to do is take that 1 hour meeting slot that we have and adapt this meeting style so we can get exploratory research through a similar type of study. And for psychologists who really know what they're doing, it's more like a generative study. It's just we have a few different rules that we're going to add to it to get some more specialized feedback. So now, believe it or not, we've overcome hurdle number 1. We found the time for UX. We're going to book a 1 hour meeting, and we're going to run a sticky note session. And that's where we slam hard into hurdle number 2. Developers are often uncomfortable giving us feedback, and there's 2 common reasons that I run into it. There are many, but the 2 most common are they're used to the old way. Some of these tools haven't been touched in 10 plus years, so why waste their time providing feedback when it's never going to amount to anything? And then problem number 2 is confrontation. If you're desperately wanting your tools to get better, the last thing you want to do is offend the 1 to 2 people who can actually make your life better by improving your tools. So we particularly have a problem receiving negative feedback, which is exactly what we need for improvement on our tool set. So we're going to solve this by using an impartial moderator, and since most of us are small teams, that means it's probably you. So your job as the moderator is to create a positive environment where everyone's thoughts matter. It is a freedom to complain zone. Let them complain as much as they feel like they need to. Any idea is valid. This is the one case where there really are no bad ideas. And nothing is impossible. We do not want them being afraid to give us feedback based off of current technical limitations, because it's our job as UX designers to help push the developers to drive that expansion in technology. However, that does not mean that you should avoid inviting certain types of risky attitudes to the meeting. In fact, some of the grumpiest people offer some of the best feedback because they've been holding in that anger for a really long time. So please feel free to invite UX doubters, reluctant participants, and while you're at it, add in those negative Nancys, party poopers, grumpy gisms, snarky Stevens, and those wackos who say GIF instead of GIF, etc. The point is that you keep this environment free from intimidation, fear of criticism, grandstanding, and being told no. We need honest and unfiltered feedback. So the way we support this as moderators is you follow the 4 rules of this meeting style. 1, everyone is equal. It does not matter if you are a top-level executive or the new intern Kyle. Everyone's opinion matters. Rule number 2, no negativity toward other participants and their ideas. However, please encourage them to be as negative as they want toward the tool set. An exact phrase that I have used to encourage this because of their reluctance is, hey, nobody's ideas are bad. However, we all know the tools kind of suck right now, so feel free to shit all over them as much as you want. And that usually opens it up a bit. So then rule number 3 is talk out loud. One of the major advantages to this meeting is the piggyback style of thinking to get the breadth of information that we need. So if people aren't talking out loud, it's really not different than doing interviews, and that's not what we have time to do. We want the advantage of this group setting. So we need people to be able to come up with an idea which sparks an idea in somebody else, which sparks an idea in somebody else, or else this meeting will not work. And then rule number 4, no sitting down. Obviously, you can't write your sticky notes and reach them and put them up on the wall. So if you're sitting down, you're not really participating, and therefore you're not really contributing the way you need to be to this meeting. So just make sure everyone is standing up. So now we've accomplished hurdle number 2. You're going to be that impartial moderator who helps facilitate the feedback we need. We've made a really comfortable environment where they can feel free complaining and giving us negative feedback filtered from consequences. And you're going to follow the rules to help everyone help remove some of the intimidation that may come in place inside the room itself. So then what we're going to do now is we're going to tackle hurdle number 3 utilizing the sticky note structure itself. So this is a relatively big problem with developers. And the result is this statement that I hear all the time from tools developers. We gave them what they asked for, and it still didn't work. And here's the dangers of asking your end users directly what they're looking for. Most users only see fragments of their problems and not the entire picture. And so as a result, if we take those fragments and turn them into a final product, it's going to have the same gaps in functionality that they had in their perception of the problem. So what we have to do is we have to get them to visualize the larger picture. Most users can tell us quite a bit about their familiar experiences, but as we start asking them to push into something more abstract like solutions and suggestions, those gaps increase. So the faster you ask for those answers, the larger those gaps are going to be and the bigger holes that are going to be in your solutions. So the way we're going to fix this is utilize that prompt cycle structure of the sticky note meeting to slowly evolve the prompts from something that's easy and personal to these abstract ideas to these concrete solutions. And over here on the left, you can see a really loose formula of how you might accomplish that. So what I'm going to do real quick is walk you through practical examples on how to apply this method to expand their thought process. So here we go. Prompt number 1, what hobbies do you have outside of work? This is a personal question, which means they know the answer. It's easy. And this gives them a chance to onboard the participants and work on writing the sticky notes down, putting them on the wall, talking out loud, getting onboarded into the protocol. It also helps us frame a little bit of who we're working with so we can communicate with them better. So then we move on to prompt number 2. What tools or hobbies do you use or tools or programs do you use for those hobbies? And the big thing that this one does is it teaches them to elaborate on the previous prompt. And that's a behavior we want for the remainder of the meeting. We want them looking back at previous answers they've given us and pushing those ideas farther. And it also gives us one more chance to really seal the onboarding process. So now by this point in time, they're experts at writing down their ideas and sticking them up on the wall. So then we jump right into question 3, which is problems. Ask them what problems they encounter in their daily workflow. And the reason we go straight into this is it's still within that familiar range over here. However, it is really easy to answer, and it's time to vent. We work in game development. It's very common for people to have issues and ideas that never get validated or addressed because of the fast-paced environment. So if you ask them what their problems are, they will provide you a plentiful amount of sticky notes because they are finally getting a chance to validate their concerns and those negative feelings they've been bottling in for a really long time. So here's where we start pushing that thought process a little bit farther by moving to prompt number 4. Are there features from other programs you wish your tools had? So this starts using existing solutions. So we're not asking them for their own solution to the problem. We want them to tell me how someone else solves it. And the reason is it's still very familiar, so the gaps are still going to be smaller. And it pushes toward this idea of solving problems. Also, as a tools developer, I now have a glossary of familiar programs that I can use to reference interaction patterns and communicate with the end developers. So if they're telling me that they really use After Effects and they like what After Effects does, I can now send YouTube videos to the tools developers so if they don't have time to ask me questions about implementation, they can reference it themselves. And it's a very amazing communication tool. So then we push on to prompt number 5. If you could create any feature, what would it be? And now we're through into that abstract and semi-concrete stage where they see those potential or the previous solutions from the last question and now build onto them. So I like this timeline, but it could be better, and here's how. And so the piggybacking here leads to a lot of breadth, because one person may say, I like that timeline, but it's missing feature A. Someone else says it's missing feature B. Someone else says it's missing feature C. And the next thing you know, all of those gaps from a single person's mindset are starting to get filled in by this group development process. So then we move on to the concrete stage, and this is the last section. We're not actually asking a typical sticky note prompt at this point in time. We're going to move on to something called the drawing exercise, and we ask them to design any new feature that they would like to have. And what this does is it takes those abstract thoughts from the previous 2 questions and starts pulling them together, and they get it down on paper. And so we document those ideas while they're still fresh in their mind. Now, the way this drawing exercise works is at the end of the meeting, you break into small groups and ask them to draw these ideas. And they spend 10 to 15 minutes drawing out their idea for the prompt. So it's not like the previous sticky notes where it's as many as possible. In this case, it's just 1. Maybe 2 if they're really ambitious, but they only have 5 to 10 minutes to draw it out. And then you take the remaining time of your meeting and let everyone present their ideas to the rest of the group. And you can see how that's kind of going on here. She's presenting her sketch, he's presenting his, they're working on theirs during the prompt session. So why is this valuable? It breaks people out of the group context. We have some issues with group mentality biases anytime we do an exercise like this. And so this gives us a chance to pull people aside and see what they come up with on their own. It also gives us a second set of priorities to compare against the sticky notes. For example, if everyone draws visual scripting tools, but visual scripting was never brought up in the problems, it's another example of how they couldn't articulate that they wanted more control of basic functionality, but they could show us that that's what they were looking for in a series of tools. And then 3, it reveals differences in semantics versus context. It's really common for people to use the same word like module, and it means a million different things to different people. And so sometimes people agree on features when they actually mean something very different. And here's some good examples of when this drawing exercise changed the path of our development cycle. We had a team that regularly disagreed on solutions, and even their sticky notes were divided 50-50. But when asked to draw, every single person on the team drew the exact same visual scripting tools. So while they were disagreeing because they were using the wrong words, they all wanted the exact same tools. So now we had a very clear path on how to move forward. Alternatively, another team, 4 different teams actually, wanted the exact same features. So they sent representatives to do one of these sticky note meetings with us. Their prompts had an average of 64% overlap in what they were looking for in the feature. However, when we asked them to draw it, the designs looked a little bit different, but here's the kicker that occurred. Teams 1, 2, and 4 were only referring to distance, but then team 3 brought up this idea of a timeline. So we couldn't tell from their drawings, but when they started presenting, it was very apparent that teams 1, 2, and 4 were only looking on evaluating distance, but team 3 wanted to compare distance over time and link an infinite amount of variables and dependencies to those 2 items. And so what we found is that although they were using the exact same words, they meant something completely different. So that differing functionality resulted in 2 different tool sets. We also had to clarify vocabulary in that case to clear up any other communication issues while developing the tools. So now you've got a bunch of drawings and hundreds of sticky notes, but as a researcher, your information is more valuable if you can track it over time. So the way we do this is really easy, believe it or not. We color code the participants. Simple math tells us 5 sticky note colors, 4 colors of Sharpies, gives us 20 unique combinations of colors. However, we have the issue of fear of giving negative input, so our users don't want to be tied directly to their feedback. So we ask a grounding question, and you can do this at the beginning, the end, or even sometime in the middle. And a grounding question only has one answer and links their sticky notes to a useful data set. So here's an example. I ask, how long have you worked here? And we have the pinup of all of the answers and the total color combinations. And when it came time to evaluate the sticky notes, we just sorted them by new users, intermediate, and advanced. And guess what? It was super easy to identify the trends that we needed and the top needs for each of those development groups on that team. It was just as simple as sorting colors. Another example, if you're feeling extra ambitious, is doing a double ground. And the way this works, you ask your grounding question, just like we did in the previous example. However, you divide the team by another piece of data set they have and give them different marker sets. In this case, the artists and designers are on the same team, so I gave all the artists blue markers and all the designers black markers. So now my double ground becomes artists versus designers and programmers versus non-programmers. And the idea was to build a matrix of where these things overlapped and really help see if we can segment our user groups and categorize those needs as much as possible. However, when we ran it, we had our top trends for programmers versus non-programmers. Obviously, non-programmers wanted more visual scripting style tools. Non-programmers wanted more flexibility in what they could do in the current tools. But when we compared it to the second ground, all of our non-programmers were artists, and all of our programmers were designers. So what was going wrong was not that we were building the wrong tools, it's that we were trying to cram too many needs into one set of tools. So we actually needed to separate and build something unique for the artists and unique for the designers, instead of making that assumption that because they're on the same team, they need the same tool set. So then we have the other issue. What happens if they don't write it down? Because once again, our users have issues articulating their problems. So we solve this the way any researcher would, by adding an observer to document the behavior in the room, such as recurring topics, concerns, hesitations, and interesting statements, or even picking up the sticky notes that were thrown into the trash. Maybe documenting just other behaviors that they didn't want us seeing. At a time when this was really useful, we had one sticky note appear that said tribal knowledge, and as you can see, it received 0 checks and 1 star. However, our observer documented over 12 different discussions on this specific topic. It's too much to remember. I always ask Doug. We can't keep up with it all. It's too complicated. I just let John do it. And the worst is if that guy leaves, we're all in trouble. So what we did is we scheduled some follow-up issues to test this hypothesis, and it confirmed the issue that we have a problem with accessibility of our knowledge set. So instead of trying to just design the tools they're asking for, the first thing we needed to tackle is getting them the information they need to use the tools they already have. So believe it or not, at this point in time, we've actually conquered all 3 hurdles. We can expand their thought process using the prompts. We're going to run the drawing exercise, track and identify our trends through the color coordination, and adding the observers to track what was not said. So congratulations, we now have all the research. They get to leave, you don't. So now, in that 1 hour, we have trackable input and ideas from 5 prompts, sketches and drawings from each participant, and observer notes. This is an enormous amount of data, or input really, because it's still very subjective. Just so to put it in perspective, this is a spreadsheet just of the sticky notes that ran before. And as you can see, as a researcher now, I can compare total checks to our top 3 votes, artists versus designers. And I even added this really nice exercise at the end, which somebody asked about this yesterday. I gave every person priority stars. So remember how you vote on each prompt. At the end of the exercise, I gave each participant 3 stars for near-term goals, 3 stars for mid-term goals, and 3 stars for late-term goals, and asked them to look over all of the sticky notes and vote for their top 3. So now I have user perspective in this section of what they think the most important features they're going to need in the near, mid, and far term are. And so based off of comparing the information they give us here, the total mentions, the priority stars, the votes, the checks, artists versus designers, I can draw multiple conclusions and help create those priorities. Also, I want to point out, this is just one question. If you look at the bottom, there's 3 more. So there's a lot of information that you can compare after getting out of this meeting to figure out what you need to be doing next. So for those of you who have producers who ask the question, how can you use this information? Go ahead and take out your cameras now. You're going to want to get a shot of the next slide. Actionable items, the big buzzword for everyone in production. Here we go. Attack the low-hanging fruit. If a sticky note is easy to do, just get it done. Make paper or clickable prototypes from those sketches that they gave us. Plan 15 to 30-minute follow-up versions of this meeting. Now that they're onboarded, you can take a feature, if they say visual scripting, design 2 prompts asking them to elaborate that visual scripting and do another drawing exercise. It will only take 15 to 30 minutes, and you can really dig into specific problems on a specific tool set. And there's that reference guide that I talked about communicating with the tool developers. Use the programs listed in problems 2 and 4 and give those to the developers so they can help communicate when you can't be there. Prioritizing feature development, which we just talked about, and you can design long-term roadmaps. A lot of this information, you can actually do these in probably an hour or 2 after the meeting with some high-level work and then dig into more of it over time to figure out how you're going to attack each individual item. In addition to the benefits that we got out of all that information, there's also some interesting social benefits as a UX designer that we get out of this. Teams typically have better consensus, fewer arguments, and better team morale after leaving this meeting because they got a chance to validate their opinions. Click. Everyone got a chance to voice their opinions, validate their concerns, and everyone had an equal vote. And everyone got to be a part of the decision-making process. So once again, that's something that's relatively rare in the game development field. So this is really important to them as users. It also builds your relationship with them to where they want to come to meetings with you, which is really hard to do, especially in internal tools. And then on top of that, it has built-in documentation. You just take a picture of those sticky notes. Dear heavens. Take a picture of those sticky notes. And actually, Mural, one of our sponsors, came up to me last night, and they actually have an app that lets you scan sticky notes on the wall and transcribe it. So check out Mural. They'll be your best friend if you use this method. And so I don't have time to go over this section, but I'm planning on tweeting out this presentation for you to download if you like. And this is tips and tricks to running a good sticky note style meeting. So if you want to take a quick picture, I'll pause right here. This is an example protocol. You can use these questions word by word, and they'll get you some very broad information. If you want advice on tailoring, you can see me afterwards, or I'll see if I can put a link in on how to do that. Gosh, this clicker. A bunch of moderator advice on how to be running a good meeting and to keep morale high in the room while you're doing it. You have to be very spunky to keep them talking. Invitation overview of who you should invite and who you should not. And a list of setup and supplies that you'll need to buy beforehand, because the last thing you want to do is run a sticky note meeting and not have enough sticky notes. So in conclusion, I do want to remind everybody that this is a very subjective process. It's great for designers who don't have access to researchers, but when in doubt, trust your researcher. This is not a one-to-one substitute for a real exploratory study, but it can get you where you need to go in a short period of time. So after this 1 hour, we can have many findings, good leads, and great references. So while it's not perfect, we can take that 1 hour and find the time for UX. Thank you.
We only have time for one quick question. So if someone has one burning quick question, this is your chance. Oh, I know that James will never let me down, ever.
So this is a quick question, which may surprise Veronica. What's the purpose of the check marks? Because you're doing checks and then stars. I'm not clear on why that's valuable.
So sometimes you have some issues with the group mentality bias where people are prioritizing based off of the conversations that are occurring in the room. So often when I go into follow-up, I'll actually compare the amount of check marks that are on there versus the priority stars to see if when they're kind of quiet and they're doing their check marks, what does everyone on the team have the most problems with versus what do they think the biggest issues are. It's really common actually to have, like, if I have 6 artists, I have 6 check marks on one, and then 5 stars on something that had no check marks. So we have to really compare what is the problem everyone encounters in their day-to-day life, which may not be the most frustrating problem, but they do encounter it frequently, versus what is so frustrating that they vote for it. So it gives us a cross-comparison set of information.
Thank you.